We're nearly at the end of November, which means, potentially, if you're in the US, you might be considering travelling for Thanksgiving, either to be with the family you share genetics with, or the folks you have chosen to be your family. And in the age of air travel chaos, not to mention, how do I put this, increased scrutiny for certain minority groups at airports, it's likely that more people this year are contemplating travelling by car than in previous years. But along with increased risks for some people from travelling by air comes increased risks out and about in the wider population, be it from law enforcement, overzealous officials, or people deciding that you either don't belong or you shouldn't be where you are. So this year, in an attempt to help everyone exist in the shit show that's exemplified by the current situation in the US, but is also the experience for many minorities and vulnerable folks across the world, we're sharing a quick travel guide designed to help minority and vulnerable folk travel safely while on road trips, primarily by an EV, but hey, go ahead and share this with anyone you know who is travelling a fair distance to be with someone they care about this holiday season. Being safe on the road these days is so much more than just making sure that you keep your seatbelt fastened, check your vehicle for any potential issues before departure, and making sure you drive within both your limits and the law. In an age where nationalism and populism is trying to usurp some of the better qualities that make us who we are, staying safe on the road can also mean making sure that you don't draw attention to yourself if you're in a minority group, and equally as important, you know how to handle any confrontations or law enforcement encounters safely. Given who we are as a channel, some viewers might be presuming this video is just about the experience of LGBTQIA plus individuals, but based on conversations we've had and the team's experience, we know it's very often also true for Black, Brown and Indigenous folks. It's true for disabled drivers, for immigrants, and also for the majority of population who, like me, identify as female. Driving in the US and in many other countries today can come with additional considerations that I hope many watching this will never have to think about. But before I get into the tips, tricks, and things you should do, I also want to talk about this week and why this video is going out today. The day when this video goes live to a general audience, Thursday, November 20th, is also the Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day where the trans community remembers those who are no longer with us, victims of unspeakable acts of violence at the hands of someone who decided that living your authentic self was somehow reason to murder. And as a trans individual myself, someone who has either attended or held observance of TGDOR every year it's existed, that's more than a quarter of a century, each year it pains me to see that the number of new names added to the list doesn't ever seem to get any smaller. Every year we see more Christian Darcy, more Brianna Gays, more Gabriela Souza da Silvas, more Leah Smiths, and more Quidzia Mahmouds. This year alone, on the day of writing this script, there are more than 320 new names on the list. A list that we know is a massive undercount. So, in a world where lawmakers are now actively seeking to dehumanize and criminalize my existence, along with the existence of so many other minorities, I and the rest of the team at the channel agreed today would be this best day for this travel tip video. And if you do have friends and family in the trans community, now would be a really good time to check in on them. This year's TGDOR is going to be very tough. I'm going to start our video with before you travel section, specifically things you should think about before travel. And the first one, as much as it pains me to admit this, is the question of should I go? I can't, and I shouldn't, tell you what's right for you. It's ultimately going to be down to your personal comfort level, along with your familiarity with solo travel. If your travel is a multi-day affair, you will probably need to think about overnight accommodation, especially if you're travelling alone, or how to sleep safely in your vehicle while charging. Some people will inherently be happier doing this than others, and I can't tell you what you should feel or do. That's down to you. For what it's worth, I currently do not travel to states where there are current trans bathroom bans or other laws that could make my very presence excuse for an arrest at the hands of an overzealous cop. Texas, Florida, and large swathes of non-coastal US states are problematic for me, partly because while my simple existence there may not be a problem, I also happen to have a rare medical condition that, should I require hospitalisation, could be problematic in places where my likelihood of getting completely non-judgmental medical care is less than zero. I am likely more cautious than most since I have had enough difficulty going through airport security with a medically necessary carry-on device that has gel pads, and I would quite like to not have to repeat that miles from home in a very unfriendly place. Some friends do travel to less welcoming places because their risk calculus is different. Being me, with this accent, also adds an additional layer of complexity that could lead to uncomfortable questions about legal status in the US, even though I am a full US citizen. For Kate Walton Elliott, that risk is even higher because she's biracial. For the longest time, I never perceived that law enforcement could be quite as racially profile-driven as they turned out to be. That was until I ended up making multiple road trips with Kate for Transport Evolved. The only times I've ever been pulled over by law enforcement in the US was when Kate was in the car and behind the wheel. Every time, the cops focused on her, not her white companions in the car. And the one time we went through an immigration checkpoint, which was within the US in the state of Texas, Kate was the only one they really wanted to know about, not myself and not Erin. And that was 5 years ago, before the current situation existed. And look, this isn't just a US problem either. I've heard of similar racial profiling in other countries around the world, both legal and illegal, causing problems for people whose skin colour or appearance isn't in line with whatever the political and ideological beliefs of that law enforcement or country happens to be. After the should you go question, or perhaps in line with it, you should ask yourself, can you take someone with you? It could be a friend or family member you can pick up en route, or frankly anyone who can help give you extra safety on the road. It's also nice if it's someone who can share the driving with you, but it doesn't have to be that way. It also doesn't have to be someone you're related to or romantically connected with. Maybe you have a friend or a co-worker who likes road trips and would be up for joining you, as long as your destination is welcoming of a +1, of course. If you're queer, having someone with you who can create the illusion of straightness for anyone observing you who might otherwise decide to cause problems is an illusion that can be a practical safety measure. And if you're a person of colour, having someone who is more melanin challenged might also help reduce the likelihood of being pulled over, or increase the probability of surviving that stop if you are pulled over. Basically, these days, there's safety in numbers. And while we're on the subject of travelling with a second pair of eyes, if there is any way you can afford it, consider getting a dashcam that not only records outside your vehicle, but inside it. I'm not going to make a massive list of recommendations, but the more discreet the dashcam, the better. And if you can get one that loop records and can easily store recordings with a simple tap, even better. For EV owners, being able to have the camera recording even while you're stopped and charging is also an absolute must. Also, it's useful to know that evidence indicates traffic stops are at their most frequent during peak commuting hours. So if you can stop somewhere to get breakfast or charge during that bit of the day and pause somewhere for dinner, to charge during the beginning of that second rush hour, it's possible that you might reduce your risk of running into that state trooper who did not successfully complete their DEI training before it was replaced with a mandatory screening of the birth of a nation. But to hedge that statement a little, there's much higher traffic density at that point, which might also explain the increased number of stops. Also useful to know if you're a person of colour is that while around 20% of stops happen between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m, the veil of darkness has been found to be somewhat protective in reducing the level of inequality of traffic stops. Or to put it another way, if they can't see you're black or brown, they're less likely to make a biased judgment to stop you. A just published review of more than 25 years of research on interactions between LGBTQ+ people and law enforcement by the Williams Institute in the US, published this week, shows that LGBTQ+ people were 9% more likely to be stopped, 11% more likely to be searched, 6% more likely to be arrested, and 5% more likely to be held in custody over the course of their lives compared with their cis-het counterparts. So having that compatriot that makes you look, at least at a cursory glance, like the cis-het couple the police like to see, that's potentially going to make your life easier. What a wonderful world of modern evidence-based policing we live in, eh? The basic question of should you go and who you should take dealt with, let's deal with some more EV-oriented questions, although some of this applies however your car is fueled. So let's talk route planning. While it's fair to say that many EV owners can simply get into their car and drive, if you're in a vulnerable group, legwork before the trip can pay off in dividends. First, for a multi-day trip, I like to plan exactly where I want to spend the night, based on a rough estimation that I can comfortably drive between 400 and 600 miles a day, assuming sensible charger availability. If I expect tougher charging challenges, or if I want an easier travel day, I might have a shorter distance between stops, or if I'm super confident about the trip, I might push for more. But instead of route planning and then finding places to stop, I kind of guesstimate around places I know will be less risky for me to spend the night. I generally stay in mid-price hotels known for general good behaviour towards minorities, but this is also true if you're someone who plans on kipping in your car or camping. Find places you're going to be safer spending a night, and then plan your charging and daily travel around that. But it's also well worth noting that even in less friendly regions, there's almost always a few islands of safety. This could be a larger town or indeed a more progressive suburb. We're going to put a bunch of resources in the show notes to this video, which we're going to leave on transportevolved.com, link in the description, to help you find accommodation on your trip that's safe. I generally find that larger hotel chains are generally safer even in more conservative or traditionally hostile places, simply because corporate doesn't want to hear about a hotel manager besmirching their otherwise good name with anything approaching isms or phobias. Of course, there is no guarantee that you won't run into the night manager who's spent a bit too long on 4chan and not enough time actually being a decent human. As always, your mileage may vary. But looking for hotel name or city plus racist or homophobic plus Reddit can sometimes help you dig out the reviews or incidents that can warn you off staying in a particular place. Similarly, a quick search of the news for a region with a similar search term can also be handy prep. Which brings me to the next recommendation. When you plan your route, share it with someone trusted, along with arranging times for you to check in with them to let you know that you're safely at your destination. You can also use Google or Apple's products to share your location with specific trusted people. Similarly, you can also use some messaging applications and also allow you to share your current location for a specified period of time. But I'm not going to get into a really long list of things here. Not all messenger apps are created equally. I think it goes without saying that most people understand messaging apps can be encrypted or non-encrypted, but the level of encryption and exactly how it works can vary from app to app. If you're going to be sharing information that you deem personal or risky, and that includes your location, do it using an app that you trust and one which has passed decent security checks. EFF Secure Messaging Scorecard and PrivaScore are both excellent places to check how those apps have performed. While I'm on the topic of safety and messaging, I do want to discuss with you the importance of building phrases and messages that you can send in the clear, i.e. unencrypted, with folks that communicate two specific things. First, I've hit some kind of problem, and two, I've hit some kind of problem, but I have it under control. These need to be unambiguous phrases that someone looking at your messages wouldn't recognise as a signal that all is not well, but signal exactly that to someone you know and trust. For this reason, your phrase pairings and messages need to be specific to you and include something that the intended recipient can easily identify as actually being from you. The messages could be a hobby you do or used to do, and importantly, can't be something you're going to actually say in usual casual conversation. Now, I'm not going to tell you what my actual safety phrases are because that would be very silly. But here's one as an example I might pick. I used to be a professional oboist, so sending a loved one a message about me just finishing a rehearsal where I broke my favourite reed would be entirely plausible for me. If I had the situation under control, maybe I would just simply append that I had found a spare reed that I used for the rehearsal. Now, someone casually reading that might not infer that there's a problem, but someone who knows me, someone I prepped that phrase with, they would know. And if you want more protection, you might want to add a third message, I need help now, or please call this particular person. Now, I know I just departed from the route planning section a little here, but that little bit about secure messaging seemed a reasonably smart place to pop that PSA because we were discussing routes and reporting in en route to someone to let them know you're fine. And if you have an EV with smart telematics and you trust the person you're going to see, you may even want to share your vehicle location from the telematics so that it can follow you on a map without requiring you to manually check in on your phone. Different automakers offer different levels of connectivity and sharing options, so that one might not be possible for you and your vehicle. So, you know where you want to stay overnight, you have your route roughly planned. Where possible, you've made sure that you've planned charging stops with redundancy and safety in mind, and this means checking out each site on PlugShare, a Better Route Planner, ChargeWay, or whatever your favourite app is that you regularly use and trust for route planning. Though multiple apps will likely give you even better data to check out a site's reliability and safety. As I recently discovered on my trip from Portland to LA, route planning apps can and will recommend you to stop at locations that make sense from a practical state of charge and overall route time perspective, but not always guarantee that those locations will be better for your personal safety. Look for charging stations in well-lit, high-traffic areas rather than ones around the back of an abandoned shopping mall or in front of a questionable-looking shop. If it's not obvious from the app, a quick check online using a mapping service with Street View or something similar can help. If you are someone who uses mobility aids or drives an adapted vehicle, you are already probably well aware that site research is imperative for a successful route, and while the gold standard is always to find a charging site that is well lit, has plenty of room around each stall, has chargers built with universal design principles and accessible, safe restrooms and facilities, the reality is usually far from it. While looks can be deceptive, a good few hours with your route planning app, your favourite search engine, and some of the links we've given in the blog post attached to this video will help you evaluate smarter choices to stop for charging. Your route planning should also include alternative places that you can charge for each primary location you're planning on stopping at, and when you leave on your journey, having a granny cable, aka a portable charging station, and any charging adapters you might need is the icing on the belt and braces cake of route planning. While the ideal in friendly places is to arrive at charging stations with a reasonably low state of charge and only charge until you have enough to reach your next destination, travelling cross countries during the holidays, especially if you're travelling through potentially more hostile places, means you should always plan on having a healthy state of charge buffer when you arrive at a site. This makes escaping or noping out without stopping so much easier. I have encountered maybe a dozen or so sites in my time driving in the US that looked okay on route planning software, but which just didn't feel good or safe when I arrived, and being able to find an alternative that felt better is so much nicer than charging while feeling vulnerable. Back when Kate Walton Elliott first got to the US and had to charge her BMW i3 Rex on the way to Portland, the Walmart she stopped at was not always friendly, and the option to just abandon that charging session and leave was one she really appreciated. Trusting your gut on this one, it's kind of important. This also extends to picking charging locations with safe, accessible food, drink, and restroom options. As with hotels, sticking with chains can often feel safer, though not always. And again, look for welcoming spaces using resources like the modern equivalent of Greenbooks, LGBTQIA plus guides, or BIPOC-friendly directories to find places where you're most likely to feel comfortable. Without a queer-friendly guide, for example, I would have never discovered a truly amazing coffee shop in Western Texas on my way to Austin. That is, before Texas became too risky for me to travel through as a trans person. The independent coffee shop we visited on our cross-country Bolt EV trip from coast to coast were all gems, and putting in the extra legwork beforehand made all of the difference in finding them. Another option for food and drink, of course, is to take your own. And when I do long-distance trips, I've been known to take my own water with me, as well as basic cooking gear, so I can cook fresh, healthy food on the road. That minimises the amount of interactions I have outside of my vehicle. But I am also a bit of a cheap ass with a vehicle that has onboard mains inverters and is large enough that I can quite easily take a portable fridge and stove and cook inside the rear of my truck if absolutely required, saving me money, sanity, and providing safety. At the same time, it's worth remembering that most people everywhere are simply focused on their own lives. Lots of people are struggling and hurting right now, and statistically, if you have to stop at a charging station in a less welcoming part of a state or a country, you're most likely going to be fine. The team knows people living in some of the most hostile parts of the US and around the world, and their day-to-day lives are generally fine. So this guide isn't about avoiding every potentially hostile place. It's about reducing the chance of a bad experience or harassment, whether from law enforcement or a random passerby. Frankly, even in liberal cities, you can encounter homophobia or transphobia or racism, so planning for safer stops and trusting your instincts helps minimise stress and risk while keeping your journey enjoyable. I've covered route planning, trip prep, and even tips on food and drink, but there are a few last-minute things you should check before leaving. First, look at the back of your vehicle. I don't want to generalise, but plenty of people aren't afraid to share their political views or interests with bumper stickers. That said, some stickers can draw unwanted attention from law enforcement in certain areas. And while I fully support your First Amendment rights in the US to voice your opinions, it's worth asking yourself, could a particular sticker increase your chances of being pulled over? Now, I am a fan of bumper stickers, from my more trees, less bush stickers in the early 2000s to fairy decals and reminders to vote on the back of my truck. I've frankly had my fair share of them. But right now, my truck has no decals on it at all. Because when it comes to travelling, as an immigrant, queer, trans person, even with US citizenship, I've found that right now in 2025, living in a more rural area, Being stealth is better in a politically volatile climate, especially when my woodworking wife tends to take the truck to visit places that may have higher numbers of folk there who are less welcoming to the queer community. Don't get me wrong, the woodworking world is so much more accepting than it used to be, but let's just say they're not all like Nick Offerman. But that's just me. Kate Walton Elliott, for example, still has both pro-queer and trans stickers on her car, along with some liberal stickers, but she also lives in a very liberal city and tends not to long-distance her car as frequently as I do. It's also why, even though Oregon doesn't require trailer registration under a certain size, all of my trailers are plated and tagged so that if I travel elsewhere, my tagged trailer reduces the chance a law enforcement officer having a bad day or missing out on their quota uses the absence of a plate as a reason to pull me over. Similarly, I usually drive well within the speed limit. Basically, don't draw attention to yourself. That's the idea. Finally, for prep, before departing, especially if you're part of a group that might be unfairly targeted, it is worth having a legal contact ready. This could be a family lawyer or a charity that specialises in legal assistance. If you are in the US, and you are, or appear to be non-European stock, even if you are American-born or naturalised, keep that number on speed dial, as SCOTUS has confirmed, and law enforcement are most certainly acting on, driving while non-white can now be enough to trigger a stop or accusations about legal status. An accent perceived as foreign can also draw attention. And even an enhanced driver's license or passport may be dismissed as fake by someone acting on outdated fears or prejudice. Having a trusted legal contact isn't paranoia, it's preparedness, and if you fit into multiple minority groups, that is even more so important. Now on to encounters. First, if you encounter someone who's hostile, don't antagonise. If someone at a charging station, rest stop or restaurant seems likely to pick a fight or actually initiates one, don't engage. Speaking clearly and loudly so a passerby can hear you is a simple but effective technique, and always keep your hands visible and in non-threatening positions. There are many excellent online resources on de-escalation techniques, so I'm not going to repeat them here, but you should know that preparedness and awareness go a really long way. Next, know where you are and understand the law regarding recording encounters where you happen to be. Some places allow audio or video recording without consent, others require one party or both parties to consent. Being aware of those local rules can protect you if a situation escalates and you need documentation. Keeping out of reach of any potential antagonist is also key. While some might suggest calling local law enforcement if they are not the instigators, I want to politely and firmly refute that suggestion. Yes, there are times when law enforcement is absolutely necessary, but if you are part of a minority group, you will know all too well that if you are not white, cishet or able-bodied, police can sadly be antagonists too. There are too many stories existing of queer, trans, BIPOC or disabled people being arrested after police arrive at an altercation that they neither started nor escalated. I also want to note here that I do not advocate carrying weapons. If you choose to carry one, that is on you, and I have intentionally left that topic out of this guide. The only guidance I would give you is to follow the advice of groups who specialise in firearm or weapons safety, and there are several excellent organisations that provide that through training to minority communities. Also, there are plenty of online resources on how to handle traffic stops, and if you're BIPOC, chances are that your parents already gave you the talk. From a 10,000-foot view, if you come from a vulnerable minority community, it's basically important to follow some basic rules. That said, I am not a lawyer, nor do I pretend to be one in real life or on YouTube. First, stay calm. Keep your hands visible on the wheel, avoid sudden movements and follow instructions. Keep the interaction short but polite. Know your rights. There is a link to a video from the ACLU in the resource list below, and remember that you can simply answer, "I wish to remain silent." And often, frankly, that's the best choice. If you choose to answer law enforcement questions, keep your answers to a minimum and don't volunteer extra information. And remember, you can also ask if you can leave. At this point, a dashcam can help document interactions, but remember that laws regarding recording police do vary by location, so research them before your trip. Also, I want to talk about pulling over safely. Most police officers expect you to stop promptly, but stopping immediately in a dangerous location like the middle of a lane or poor visibility area can be risky. Meanwhile, some police officers may interpret any delayed stop as evading enforcement and an excuse to arrest you, while others might see stopping in a hazardous spot as justification for further action. So use your best judgment. Slow down safely, signal and pull over as quickly and as efficiently and as safely as you can without putting yourself or others at risk. Play it by ear and prioritize safety first. Now, if an officer asks you to roll down your window, you only need to open it enough to communicate clearly and hand over documents. There is no requirement to lower it down all the way. As for your legal rights, you can refuse consent. Police generally need a warrant or a probable cause to search your vehicle, and you also have the right to remain silent and request legal counsel before answering further questions. However, we should keep in mind that right now, immigration enforcement in the US has, in multiple documented cases, operated outside of the bounds of the law, ignoring all legal precedent. But knowing what is typically expected and legal should be able to help protect yourself. If you've made it this far through the video, thank you. I hope the tips and tricks I've shared help make your trip to spend those holidays with those important to you easier if you are from any of those communities mentioned. And if you're not from any of those communities, well, I want you to understand that this video hasn't been about a political agenda, but rather shining a light on the reality of travelling in 2025 in an EV while being from a minority group who has fewer rights, either through law or just through prejudice, than those who are not from that group. It's fair to say that for so many EV owners today, especially with certain makes and models of EV, road tripping is now literally a case of jumping behind the wheel and putting the route in and following whatever the vehicle says. But for so many of us, that has never been the case, and at this point in history may never be. And if that frustrates you, and if you're in a position to affect change so that the future is more Star Trek Next Generation and less Blade Runner, well, now's the time to get involved and be that ally and that advocate. Get involved in grassroots efforts in communities, be welcoming, push for changes to make the world more equitable for everyone. Finally, while this video covered a whole bunch of different minorities and approaches to staying safe on the road, I'm going to finish by remembering the people who are no longer with us in the trans community because of hatred, division, and lies spread about that community by those in positions of power. I hope that you will read the list as it goes by and remember that each of those names have people who loved and cared for them and who miss them every single day. And I hope that you will build a future where the Transgender Day of Remembrance is no longer another year of reading hundreds of names of people who have needlessly been wiped from this earth.